all votes count.
Commissioner, with regard to the measures that you're taking, and I'll intrude on my own time with this, my perception is, and I realize that you may be looking at it differently, is that you're still putting the burden of proof as to eligibility on the back of the voter, that he must respond to one mailing or another. When in fact I think the fair, more reasonable approach might be to prove that he should not be on that list in the first place. Again, that's just my view. I have described this as the election from hell, and it may well have been. At least it was at my poll site. I'm not gonna go.
Which was where?
66 Frankfurt Street, which happens to be the same location where Scott Stringer had his press conference.
Okay.
So it's just up the block at Southbridge Towers, right across from the seaport. Now, I've been a poll worker since 2001. I've never complained about a coordinator until now. And I've had good coordinators and bad coordinators.
Yeah, because I don't want to disparage someone without having an opportunity to talk to the person.
I will simply relate what happened.
Okay, fine,
Okay,
thank you.
just
Thank you.
one incident out of several, but it was the big one. We had 3 scanners. All of them mysteriously, almost simultaneously broke down. Now, that's the good news. The bad news was the reaction of the coordinator, who had what I can best describe as a meltdown. She became panicked, hysterical, crying, had no idea that there was an alternative emergency ballot procedure. Opening up the top door of the scanner, flipping down the silver lid, inserting the ballots, counting them later. So simple. She wouldn't do any of that. Now, on the premises was a friend and neighbor who happens to be a member of Community Board 1. I told him of the emergency procedure, gave him the same once-over lightly that I've just mentioned here now. He called the Board of Elections, spoke to somebody at the top, gave his phone to the coordinator, and she cried some more. Now, voters were told while the machines were broken down, you can't vote, you cannot vote your ballot until the repairman comes. She went over to the table where I was sitting, told the poll workers, you are not to give out any new ballots until the repairman comes.
The next group, I'm Susan Lerner from Common Cause New York, and we facilitate the New York Voter Coalition. The next group of speakers are members of representatives of groups that are members of the New York Voter Coalition. What we try to do is coordinate our presentation so that we highlight specific problems, but we have a second part of our presentation, which is we'd like to discuss solutions with you. Perhaps what would make sense is to go through the problems now so that the public who have other reported problems can have an opportunity to address you, and then we can come back and discuss some suggestions.
My name is Julia Chung. I'm from the Minkwon Center for Community Action. We're a nonprofit based in Flushing, Queens, and we're also the lead organization for AP Voices, which is an 18-member coalition of Asian organizations working to improve civic engagement in New York City. And so, a few weeks ago, Minkwon Center, we started doing checks. We've done a lot of voter registration for newly naturalized, newly registered Asian Americans in the city, and so we did just a random spot check. And we chose 6 people out of the random group, and we found 2 were fine, their names were fine, their political affiliation was fine, everything was fine, but then 2 people were misspelled. Their names were misspelled, which was an easy fix. We have scans of all the people we registered, so we were able to call the board of election and get that fixed. But then there was 2 people who were completely gone from the voter rolls. And we're based in Queens, and so the majority of the community that we serve are in Queens. And a lot of the organizations that are part of AP Voice are also in Queens. And so I don't want this, so I want to highlight that this is not just a Brooklyn problem, this is also a Queens problem. It gets as much press as Brooklyn, but Queens, our community is here and we really want to focus on that. And so just to focus on the people who are not on the rolls and the people who had misentered data. And so I just wanted to go through those 2 parts real quick. So we had a coalition member from Addie Carr, who's in Jackson Heights, and she had registered her mom, I'll speak really quick then. She had registered her mom, and her mom was missing from the voter rolls. And when she went to the poll sites, she was not on the rolls, and so she didn't vote, and she didn't know that she could vote by affidavit, and so she went home, and it was only when her daughter came home, found out she couldn't vote, that she dragged her mom back home and got her to vote. And another organization, Calca, they had delivered a stack of voter registration to the Campaign Finance Board. They scanned it in and said everything was okay, but 6 voters that were in that stack were not in the voter rolls. And so they were going through, talking to the Campaign Finance Board, talking to the Board of Election, trying to find out why these people were missing. And then for the people who had misentered data, there were people who had registered as Democrat, and the next thing you know that they were independent so they couldn't vote. And so this happened to multiple people, and multiple people in Woodside, in Jackson Heights, and Flushing. Thank you.
Time's up. I am Kate Warren. I am a board member of the Legal Women Voters, and I'm also a poll site coordinator. We had a regular telephone information service at the lead going on Tuesday, and we heard the same complaints that you're very familiar with. But also, ballots not available. Now that's very different than voting on affidavit ballot, and we feel very confident, at least I can speak for the league, we feel very confident that you're going to do the right thing by all those affidavit voters and not deny anyone who's entitled to a vote. But if someone doesn't get a ballot at all, if they're not offered an affidavit ballot, that is a disenfranchised voter. And we're very concerned about that. And we're also very concerned about poll sites that didn't open on time. Because, I know I heard publicly in certain places in the press that no voter was disenfranchised. But if a poll site doesn't open, or a voter is not offered an affidavit ballot at all, that voter is disenfranchised. That voter's vote isn't going to show up anywhere, not in the scanner and not in the affidavit ballot envelope. And we're very, very concerned about that, and I hope that it's something that will be addressed going forward. And wearing my coordinator hat, I can tell you that a lot of this is poorly trained poll workers. And it's very distressing, and it's something I've been saying publicly for years and years and years. And, just this gentleman's anecdote doesn't surprise me. It's very stressful. And I hope that whatever examinations you do and whatever remedies you come up with, that you have a really robust attempt, and not just an attempt, a really robust system for recruiting people and training them so they know what to do.
And Loree Daniel Favors, General Counsel for the Center for Law and Social Justice at Medgar Evers College. CLSJ is a racial and social justice advocacy law center, and we are pleased to be a part of this coalition. Over the course of Tuesday's presidential primary election, we received complaint after complaint regarding voters' inability to vote, poll sites opening late, and dozens of people being turned away as not being registered even though they were. New York City has been here before, and we have been actively engaged over the course of our history in helping to assist in the modernization of the voting process. And we are quite frankly sorry to see some of the regression that has taken place that has limited the ability for many New Yorkers to vote. Most specifically in relation to the purging that has happened. And quite frankly, voting purges are the most effective form of voter disenfranchisement. They're better than butterfly ballots. They're more effective than illegible ballots, even because to simply remove a voter from the poll is quite frankly the most effective way of ensuring their voice is not heard. So we would demand that those who have been removed would be replaced, and in acknowledgement of the comments made earlier, wholesale poll cleanup is not quite the same as disenfranchisement and the removal of voters from the polls in a broad-reaching process that seems to be really at the root of a number of the issues that we've heard today. We have 2 situations in particular we'd like to report on in keeping with the earlier comments. Voters who showed up to vote, who were lifelong voters, who have been lifelong Democrats, who were either indicated showing up as independents and not able to vote, or who were registered or shown as registered online but not showing up in the book itself when they showed up at their poll site. And we would urge that many of the comments that have been made today and the later suggestions that will include solutions would be taken to a level of high priority, because we are, as you know, in a high election year, and think that this is one of the key forms of preventing New Yorkers from being able to participate in the vote.
Some of what we got back really indicates the lack of communication and the degree of alarm which voters feel, because this is somebody from Queens. I had a really upsetting experience yesterday. I went to my voting office with my husband. He was on the list, however, I was not. This was strange because we both used the same voting office to vote in 2012. She voted by affidavit, and then she found out, later that evening, I found out that my vote did not count because I was taken off the registered voter list. I feel my rights were taken away. I am worried I will not be able to vote in November. I'm also worried about all the voters that think they are registered and didn't come out to vote in the primary but want to vote in November. Someone needs to investigate. We have a voter from Queens who is a 50-year resident of Jamaica. She last voted, she's lived at the same address for more than 50 years. She has not changed her party registration. She last voted in 2015. Yesterday, when I attempted to vote, I was informed my name was not on the books as a registered Democratic voter. I called the Queens Board of Elections, spoke to the registration supervisor, who informed me I was not listed as having voted in the last 50 years, and that there was no record of my registration under my social security number. So the procedure, Executive Director Ryan, that you outlined of going back through the records and being sure that this person was not denied her franchise probably is not going to work, because if the records don't show her 50-year voting history and she has no standing to actually be part of the process, then her affidavit may very well not count. We heard from a number, yes, and we'll provide all of the information. And a lot of what I'm talking about will be up on our website starting tomorrow for people to be able to see. But the concerns are very, very real. Again, people who got to their voting place and it was not open. Or stories we have where the voting place was open, but the poll workers told them at 6 o'clock, we're not ready, come back later. And we also heard from people who were genuinely confused by the primary ballot. We got a lot of calls from people who said, I don't understand how this works. I don't understand why one candidate has more delegates than another candidate. I'm supposed to vote for 7, but this one has 5, that one has 6. What if I screw it up? Will that hurt my candidate? A lot of confusion.
Some of the issues that we encountered, I was in contact with the board, with specifically Rachel Michael, throughout the day, and we resolved some of the issues. Some of the other issues that I wanted to bring to your attention. We had a voter in Confucius Plaza that wanted to vote in the special election, but not in the primary election. The poll worker informed them that no, if you want to vote in the special election, you must also vote in the presidential primary election, and refused to give him a ballot for the special election. He left the poll site, returned after speaking with us, and demanded to vote in the special election. Only then was he allowed to vote in the special election. We had other voters that were ineligible to vote in the presidential primary election and were not given the special election ballot. We had a voter that came to vote at PS 130 in Chinatown. They were not found in the voter roll. They were given an affidavit ballot. As they were completing the affidavit ballot, the poll worker said, oh, wait a second, we found you in the voter roll. The voter said, great, let me vote like everybody else. Here's the affidavit ballot. The poll worker insisted, no, you already started filling out the affidavit ballot, it's too late. So you have to vote by affidavit ballot. There were so many issues around the special election and affidavit ballots, as other people mentioned. We were at those 5 poll sites and we interviewed 513 voters. I really shudder to think about all the voters that we didn't contact. These are just anecdotes, but speaking to the other groups in the coalition, it seems like this was a much larger problem. And I just wanted to close with this. In the Bronx, in Parkchester, we had one of our volunteers over there at these large apartment complexes. They vote in the basement there. There's very little lighting. The poll workers themselves had asked us to bring the attention to the board. There's not enough light. People can't see the ballot. The space is too small. People are waiting about 30-35 minutes to vote for this primary election. I really am scared about what's going to happen in November if those poll sites remain the same. We're going to write up our observations throughout the city, as we always do, in a detailed letter to you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Here is that the board is willing to commit to having every affidavit counted before election results are certified, to rectify the gross mistake of such invalid results cannot be certified with any faith. If your commitment to, quote, restore the confidence of the public is true, will the board commit to counting these ballots before certification of the results for the state convention? This is as an absolute baseline. Will the board commit to having every affidavit counted and verified?
Some of those
verified, to have every voter verified, and those that are verified to have those ballots counted before the May 5th deadline.
Mr.
Ryan just said that.
Right, the painstaking explanation that we went through was to try to make that clear. If it wasn't made clear, I will say potentially invalid will be scrutinized.
John Plateau, Kings County Democrat.
Alan Shulkin, Manhattan Democrat.
Frederick Humane, Manhattan Republican.
Lisa Gray, Richmond Republican.
Simon Schmidt, Kings Republican.
Michael Andino, Deep Bronx County Republican.
Michael Michelle, Queens Republican.
Michael Ryan, Executive Director.
Senior staff, executive manager.
Carmesino, CRU.
Yvonne Weaver, CRU.
Troy Johnson, CRU.
Nina M. Crispino, Director of Personnel.
Kenneth Moulton, Council Commissioner.
Stephen Dankford, Council for Commissioner.
Steve Richmond, General
Raphael Spino, Deputy General Counsel.
The meeting of the Board of Canvassers of the City of New York regarding the certification of the results of the April 19, 2016 presidential primary. We have a motion to adjourn the certification, postpone the certification till Thursday at 3:30. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I went to war in 2007 for OIF and OEF, and I live in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. I came here today to talk about voter incident reporting that I took when I was volunteering at the Working Families Party. I received numerous calls, not even numerous calls, one after another, phone calls of people who couldn't get to vote, who were being turned away at the gates, who were being denied the opportunity to fill out an affidavit ballot. But today, when I see a board like sitting back, apathetic, laughing at people, laughing at the general public, denying a motion to adjourn the certification of the primary when clearly there's a problem. We're here to serve the people. We, the people, demand a resolution to the problem. Over 100,000 voters were just deregistered, and Scott Stringer and de Blasio came out conceding the fact that they were behind because, you know, we just never got around to it. Well, just get around to doing a revote. Get around to No, I am a Democrat.
Okay.
I registered on time.
Okay, so you got to vote.
I got to vote,
Okay.
but my
Let others
brothers and
vote.
sisters
All
did
black.
not. I saw senior citizens who made arrangements to get to their polling location, turned around. They've been active Democrats, active Republicans. It had nothing to do with their party or who they were voting for. The fact that they were denied the right to vote undermines democracy.
Yeah.
It undermines the fundamental principles of this nation. I didn't go to war, and I didn't go to war with my friends, many of whom didn't come back just to get this thrown away. I and my brothers and sisters are entitled the right to vote. And before I pop off, because I'm already there, we deserve that respect. And for the first docket of order for you guys to just deny a motion to adjourn the certification without having heard anybody's voices first.
Yeah, that's right.
Is unpalatable to me.
All the affidavit ballots are counted, and we have an accurate number, which is why we have adjourned the certification.
Stop lying.
I'll stand with the objectors. This is a shameful event in New York City history. Shameful. I'm very concerned about the New York City primary, and what this represents is an assault on democracy. These are the 5 boroughs: Staten Island results, Manhattan results, Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens. All of these votes are placed in a black box. This black box is unaccountable, untestable, privately run software from the 2 companies that you have hired to count our votes. So when the votes come out of this black box, they do not reflect the New York City or the national votes. In 22 primaries, the votes have shifted in 20 of them. The exit polling data in New York State shifted 12%. A shift of 2% is fraud, according to the U.S. State Department. So that's what we've seen across the country. 1 minute left. Richard Charnon, a mathematician, has been studying election data for years.
You cannot speak directly into the mic. We can hear you. Step back.
Can you hear me?
Step back from the mic.
Or we're
I'm
gonna
glad
cut
you
off
can
the
hear
mic.
me.
I'll cut it off.
So only the developers can see the software. Only the hired contractors can see the software. It's a completely untransparent process. This software is stealing votes.
30 seconds.
I have 30 seconds. All I can say is this country can't survive much more of your kind of democracy. Thank you.
You can identify yourself.
Lisa Berry, first tenant of this land. And nobody seems to care that their vote was lost. There's no even thought about a revote. It's shocking to me. It's not democracy. I don't know what country I live in. I want to report, too, that when I went to vote, I was given misinformation by the gentleman who ran the entire polling place by telling me that if I didn't vote for 6 delegates, that none of the delegates would count. They would all be thrown out. I then got onto social media to let the world know, you better, vote for 6 delegates. And I was told that that was misinformation. I know many people who voted who were avid Bernie Sanders supporters who wound up voting for 2 and 3 Clinton delegates because they were told this information. I also found out that in different districts there were different amounts of delegates for Bernie Sanders. Some had 6, some had 5, and some had 6 and some had 5. Some people were told they had to have 6 or was going to be thrown out, some people 7. So I also want to say I was completely mistreated at the Varick Street Department of Board of Electors the last 2 days. There was enormous secrecy. They wouldn't let me stand. They wouldn't let me sit except for 2 feet away from the tables. I was there on behalf of the delegate. They called security because I was in the wrong part of the room that they didn't tell me about. The security guard held his hands up and wouldn't let me pass. I was told that I couldn't look at the ballots, even though I know the law is that I'm allowed to. And the next day, they did everything they could to prevent me into the room. And that is a disgrace. I felt like I wasn't a citizen. Thank you.
I would like to talk about my experience as a poll worker. I'm a member of the public. Now, the public is allowed to be part of the audit process.
Are you a poll watcher or poll watcher?
Part of the
Poll watcher.
poll watcher, yeah. So I was a poll watcher. I was observing the process. It's an open process. This is supposed to be open to the public, and I was made to stand behind the ropes until I got a certification. So I got my certification, came back the next day. I checked out the absentee ballots. It was a bipartisan group. They were counting ballots, opening ballots in front of me. I was able to check out the tallies, but everything was great. They were polite, but when it came time to the affidavits, that's when I started seeing some secrecy. I was told I could not see where they were verifying ballots. Like ballots were being verified behind closed doors in another room. Like they were being counted in another room, they were being processed in another room, verified, and then they were brought into another room where we then got to see them be counted. But we only knew what was going to be. We only got to see the ones that were verified. So we're kind of curious. Where are the ones in the back room?
Adele Hauer. I want to talk about my specific California. I went to re-register. I live here now in the state of New York this year, and I went to register before the March 25th deadline, and I was nervous because I've been following this election very closely and have been very aware, though CNN and the mainstream media isn't reporting about it, I'm very aware that there's been lots of problems with the elections, the primary elections and caucuses in other states. And specifically right after the Arizona primary, I was trying to register to vote here. So I was nervous and brought a friend with me to to witness my registering, which sounds ridiculous, but I felt the need to. And then, funny enough, after I registered, I had him look at it. He was a registered Democrat who had been registered here for several years, and he, as long as he was there, said, I'll get a printout of my registration to confirm mine, because the Bernie Sanders campaign was notifying people that they were being turned away at the polls and being told they needed proof of their registration, which is ridiculous. But so he got his proof of his registration. I turned in my registration at the Board of Elections. I was then notified the week of the deadline that by the Bernie Sanders campaign that I was not registered. So I called the Board of Elections and I asked what was up. They told me, number one, that if I had done it online or via mail, sometimes those don't go through. That's unacceptable. That's completely unacceptable. But I did register in person, and after 3 days of them telling me, call back tomorrow, talk to this person doesn't exist. No one would have told you to call back and talk to that person. Finally, someone said, you might want to come down and re-register. I went down the final day and re-registered, and they said, as far as we're concerned, you never came in here, you never registered to vote. I did, but thank God Bernie Sanders campaign let me know, and I re-registered. My friend who came with me and had his proof there that he was had been a registered voter, he was denied his right to vote and had to vote affidavit. This is ridiculous. And thousands of other people have the same kind of vote.
But I am here. I helped bring all of these people, and thank you so much for being here today, everybody. I spoke last week, and I'm just going to reiterate a couple things. We are freaking furious. Last week I said thank you so much, and I'm sorry, but I got to take that back. I do not thank anybody here in this room at all. We need to stop the certification from happening. It's in 2 days, and that is our #1 demand. We need the certification to be stopped. Hundreds of thousands of voters had their registration deleted. Thousands had their party switched. Thousands were turned away. 100,000 voters were forced to vote on affidavit and provisional ballots, which were not counted. This is unacceptable. That's hundreds of thousands of people who couldn't vote, and that's 100,000 people who voted on ballots that weren't even counted. Unacceptable. This is not democracy. We want to stop the certification. We want an independent investigation. Election fraud! Election fraud! Stop this independent investigation! Election fraud! Election fraud! Stop the certification! Election fraud! Election fraud! Independent investigation!
And counting the valid affidavit ballot process. You don't just count 100,000 ballots by waving a magic wand. It's not an add water and stir process.
No speaking from the floor. Sit down.
So what I'm saying is, the information that the last speaker put out, that the 100,000 ballots plus are being thrown out, is simply not true. We're in the process of counting them now. We can't give you a number.
How do you certify?
How do you count votes where people didn't vote?
We cannot.
How do you count ballots when
we're gonna get
didn't vote?
If you want a polite exchange and an explanation for what's going on, we'll do that. If you don't, and you just want to...
If you have to...
Officer, can you escort her out?
Right? If you want to shout people down, then
I didn't get the vote. She didn't get to vote. I didn't get to vote in Brooklyn. Now.
Come with me, please.
How are you gonna count my vote? I didn't get to vote.
She has a right to say that.
Yeah, she has a right to vote.
It's not her turn to
Not anymore.
It's not her turn to speak.
Virginia, we're...
that there is a process, and we are following the law, and we are going through the process of dealing with the affidavit ballots. This is the way it works. 1 week after the election is completed, by law, we begin to open the paper ballots. That is done in an open and public process. We had them in all 5 boroughs. Listen, I know that there's a lot of people out there that know the election process better than I do, and I appreciate that. But I'm going to try to let you know the process as I know it. Okay? We have an open process in all 5 boroughs. Representatives from each campaign can sit at the table and watch the ballots being opened, where the ballots are being opened and then ultimately tabulated, so that there is no interference. These people have to be able to work. We're in the process of doing all of that work, and it is quite cumbersome, and it is a piece of paper, envelope by envelope process. And that's the way elections have been certified in New York with respect to people who were not in the poll book since time immemorial. Now, the other thing is, and you need to understand this, the affidavit process exists for valid reasons. People may think it doesn't, but a full 40% or more of the population of the city of New York moves on an annual basis. If for some reason we don't get notified of that move, under Motor Voter, you can vote in the new place where you live, not where you were previously registered. If you show up there to vote and you're not in the book, that's not the fault of the Board of Elections. That is the fault of the voter that did not let the Board of Elections know they moved. We then give you an affidavit. Why? Because if you were previously registered somewhere else, and you now move to a new location, you get to vote by affidavit, and your vote will count, provided that you were duly registered at some location within the 5 boroughs of the city of New York. That is a valid aspect of this process. Whenever people vote by affidavit, we have to go through it envelope by envelope, ballot by ballot, because you can't automate the process. So while I appreciate everyone's frustration, keep this in mind. Typically, we have 3 weeks after an election to conduct a certification. Because of the timing of this election calendar, we're trying to compress that into 2 weeks.
I have a screenshot from April 1st where I was a registered Democrat. All of my information was correct. On April 6th, I was no longer enrolled in a party. When I went to the Board of Elections, they told me that yes, I had filled out a form in 2013, that I guess I failed to check off party enrollment. However, this makes no sense that this change was made 2 weeks prior to the primary. Why wasn't this made in 2013? Why was my record touched 2 weeks before the primary?
You were there last week, by the way.
Yeah, I never spoke. To pretty much expose a fraudulent systemic practice in the counting of your mail-in ballots at the BOE office of Queens. Upon going in as a volunteer witness last week, there are 3 steps to the process. Correct me where I'm wrong, but don't make it long. A, B, C. A, you open up the mail-in ballots. B, you scan the ballots for the counting. And then C, if something's damaged, you correct it, and then you scan it in. Fairly simple, straightforward. That should be transparent and very visible. What was actually going on was that between A and B, ballots were being carted into a middle room, a corridor room, and they were being locked out of sight. We don't know exactly how many ballots were affected in this way, where they were being spit out through the other side, of which I could not see, and then scanned in to these scan machines. Now, there were 6 tables, 2 employees each. We figured these trays are around 400 envelopes per tray. So, 2,400 envelopes within an hour or so processed, right? If you do that within 10 hours and then a couple of days, we're talking about tens of thousands of ballots that were not visible in the process. They were completely obstructed from my view and others' views, other people's views. This is fraud. Right? This is corruption. You guys should do something very seriously about this.
30 seconds.
We're closing at 5 o'clock, so we can...
I understand that you're concerned about 5 o'clock.
30 seconds.
2 minutes and your
I
minute
think we
are
should
up.
bring the U.S. Attorney over here and have you guys looked into. We need the U.S. Attorney here now.
First observation came during my poll worker training. I don't know how serious this is, but it just rankled me. So I was informed that poll watchers are supposed to be composed of bipartisan teams of Republicans and Democrats to ensure no partisan bias. And they
Poll workers?
poll workers,
Yeah.
yeah. And then I was also told that sometimes there's shortfalls of Republicans, so that if they would just arbitrarily assign me as a Republican, I should accept that and not contest it, because otherwise people might ask questions. Then I was assigned as an R inspector, and I felt a bit uncomfortable about that. And I would hope that if this is an important concern, that before the general election, that this is corrected, because I'm a registered Democrat. Sorry. Manhattan. Manhattan. So that was my first observation, which was a little troubling before the election actually started. Then during election day, there were a lot of misinformation and kind of confusion about how to actually vote. So there were people wanted to know how to vote for delegates, and I don't know how important this is. I was still a little confused. The direction said choose any 6. One poll worker said choose exactly 1. Another poll worker said choose exactly 6. And when I called the Board of Elections, the first person didn't know, but the second person said choose up to 6. So I'm a little confused about what the instructions were. So that's the second thing.
Did you look on the ballot?
It says choose any 6. So that would, for me, it was very clear. I would choose 6.
Okay.
Is it up to 6 or is it exactly 6?
Any
Any 6 or none.
Or 9.
We can't make you vote for people.
Correct. So, I'm
So
trying to
it's up
understand
to
if
6.
Up to 6 is
Any-
different than 6.
Correct, but you vote for any 6, means you cannot exceed 6.
That's clear to me now.
We can't force you to vote for delegates if you don't want to vote for them.
All I'm saying is there was confusion. There was 3 different sets of instructions being given. So that's
The
just.
ballot
All right.
has instructions.
Thank you.